Hello and good evening, everyone. Good evening, good morning, Professor Cox. Good evening, all the students and attendees who have joined us today, this Monday evening, to learn about Studio Fine Arts. This session is presented to you by the Next Genius Foundation. Next Genius is a registered charitable trust in India, and we help high school students with scholarships for their undergraduate education in the US. Um, all of you grade 12 students or gap year students who are looking at applying to Next Genius partner colleges, we invite you to check out our website, which is next-genius.com, and learn more about our process. Union College is also one of the Next Genius partner colleges, and scholarships are available at Union Colleges as well. And today with us, we have Dr. Lorraine Cox from Union College. She is the chair and an assistant professor at Union College in the Visual Arts Department. Professor Cox actively participates in programs that promote, mentor, and support and retain a diverse community of students and faculty at Union. So that's something very interesting about her. So today we'll learn and discover how studio fine art programs at the top US colleges are structured. Over to you, Professor Cox. It's a great pleasure to have you with us here today and looking forward to your presentation.
Wonderful, and thank you. And it's great to be here. I love any opportunity to talk about the visual arts. So this is especially exciting for me, and especially being a professor for 20 years at Union College, a small liberal arts college here in upstate New York, and being the chair and seeing how our majors go through our program. And long enough I've been there that they're in very successful careers, they're having children. So I really have gotten to see students do this sort of the arc of their education and then go on to their careers. And so what I wanted to do today, and of course I want to make sure we have time for questions, is to talk about the basic structure of visual arts major. Now, every school is somewhat different in terms of if they have both concentrations, whether or not they offer a major and minor. But there's basically two areas when you study the visual arts. You're either doing the studio arts, which means you're a studio arts practice, a practitioner. So anything from digital art and design to painting, to photography, all of those areas in which you're creating materials and objects. Or ideas even, and then art history, which is my area. I'm an art historian, and when you study art history, you're also looking at a range. Your material is now the history, the locations, and so everything from ancient art to European art to Asian art to Latin American art. Personally, my focus is in modern contemporary art, and those are the courses I teach in. So you'll have professors who have their concentrations in art history, and you'll have professors who have their concentrations in a studio practice. Like all colleges and college professors, we're all active in our craft. Our studio professors, what they do is they're also doing their exhibitions, they're making their work, be national, international exhibitions. As art historians, we call ourselves scholars because we're largely involved with sort of research and writing, in doing things like books and articles. And then you can also, some schools like Union, which was also my concentration, is a dual concentration where you're taking half art history and half studio. And that's really a great opportunity to really see the connections between what you're studying, to be inspired. I always say, if you want to be a good writer, you read the great books. If you want to be a great artist, you look at great art, and vice versa, right? If you're an art historian, you should try painting. So at Union, we require students to take, if they're doing a studio concentration, take 2 art history, and if you're doing 2 art history, to take 2 studio courses. And what I want to do, because the question often people ask is, what do I do with an art major? And I had quite a bit of text here, but I think it's really important to think about, how do you leverage into a career? And there, of course, you have your, the education, the dedication, your talent. You need all of that to sort of get yourself set up for the career you want to pursue. And there are a wide variety of careers in which students who are a visual arts major may go into. And so when you look at the variety, you'll see there are so many options. And you'll be surprised at how many choices there are in what you might do, and things you might not think would be a career that would come out of the visual arts. And so here are 60, actually there's way more. I think I had to cut this down just to fit the screen, but just to give you a sense of what you might pursue with a visual arts major. And here are just, these are not everything, but I think people really need to know all the type of careers you can go into. You can be something more on the business side, where you're doing, working in an auction house, particularly art historians. So you're selling works of art, very famous, valuable works of art. You can be an investor. There are people who want to invest in art, and you can be a private investor in terms of you go to exhibitions, you go to museums, you find the work that a collector might want. You have to really know what you're doing if you're going to be paying millions of dollars for, or having someone pay millions of dollars for a work of art. There's also all the practices, fashion designer, film production, illustrator, even a tattoo artist, you know, museum curator, director, videographer, web designer. And so these are just, you know, some of the careers you might go into, and they all involve being able to look at things that are visual, interpret things that are visual. How do you produce an image that's going to appeal to people? This is even marketing, right? You're marketing the product, the website, the design of the box. You know, of course, the great example is Apple, right? They took the model of something very simple, just an apple, but that was a lot of thought goes into just doing something simple. So that's also something important to think about. And I'm more than happy, you know, as we get to the end of this, to answer any questions. But I can tell you, I've had students who are in almost every one of these careers. I don't have a student who's a tattoo artist yet, but I have students who've gone on to be architectural historians, where they're restoring great buildings. I've had students, one student is a designer for Vineyard Vines, which is a clothing company he's a designer for them. And he took my art history course in modern art. He was particularly interested in things like Russian posters from the 1920s and the revolutionary period. He then had a senior show in which he took sections of logos like McDonald's ads. And you know, he really sort of understood the relationship between images and how it communicates to a public. And he went on to be this designer for Vineyard Vines. I've had students who've gone on to run galleries as well. And I'll talk a little more about some of that. But just to give you some visuals, you know, I think what's important to understand is, particularly at a liberal arts college, what's wonderful is you're taking other courses across the curriculum. You have your concentration, but you can also do a major or minor. On the left is a student. She was an engineering minor with a visual arts major, and she made this incredible, this is from her senior show, in which she painted these pieces of paper that opened up like flowers and would close. She's gone on to do some really interesting work. She's particularly interested in architecture. She's in architectural school. So you can see the connection between how do you build something, put it together, make it look appealing. Those are basic skills you get in a visual arts program. And I don't mean basic, but in sense that those are the foundational. And from that, lots can blossom. And then you have on your right, you know, working in a studio. This is the welding studio at Union College. We actually just had a $15 million renovation about 6 years ago, which doubled the capacity for our studio spaces, all new equipment, all new ventilation. The other great thing at Union is we also provide supplies. So if you're thinking about an art major, do make sure you do some research about the facilities you're going to be working in. Find out, like, our supplies provided? Do I have to find them on my own? You definitely want to look up, if you go to the website, I'll show you a website to get a sense of how to also investigate a college's website to learn more about the major. So basically, your visual arts major comes down to your foundation courses. These you'll take your first year. Union, for example, we have students take across different mediums. So they have to take an art or painting course. They have to take a photography course, they take a printmaking course, they take a 3D or sculptural design. Or you also have our digital arts, Introduction to Digital Arts, which is a very popular program. We've had to keep adding more courses to that. And then you take an intermediate level, usually you're 2 of those areas you're particularly interested in. You will then take a second course in them. And then by the time, that's your sophomore year, and then by the time you're junior and senior year, you begin to have a concentration, usually in one area. So it might be digital, or might be photography. But oftentimes those things could be combined. You know, there's not hard boundaries in the visual arts, right? I mean, something that's visual can take many forms. And so that's something, you know, to think about. How flexible would a program be for me to combine different areas? And for most our programs, this leads up to your senior show, which at Union, we have a beautiful gallery. We doubled our space with the renovation. The whole building is also temperature control, which is also important. And what's also really important about our building is we have a gallery in the building. So it's really important when you're, you know, in your visual arts major, you have to see art. You have to actively do it. And so one way we do is we bring exhibitions to campus. Most our programs have a gallery. So that's another important thing to think about. How much access will you have on campus to look at professional art? We bring in professional artists, international and national artists. They come in, they give talks, they might do workshops. The students work with us on catalogs. Even your senior show, you'll get to make your own catalog. And this past spring, because of the shutdown due to COVID, we were able to do an online exhibition, which you can all see on our website, as well as a catalog that we made for the students. And so what I want to do now is sort of just to sort of look at the websites. What's important for any major is to really sort of investigate and drill down to some of the specifics and details. So to take you to that, trying to get my screen here. And you'll see, when you go through, it's really important to think about the type of courses and their descriptions, art history, studio, how many faculty and staff are there, and what's their areas, their resources, their facilities, exhibition spaces, any news that are going on with the artist, and exhibits. And just to sort of look at, when you look at some of the majors, you'll see you can do a major. You can also at Union and some schools do an interdepartmental, meaning you can combine a major of visual arts with any other major on campus, except for maybe engineering, because engineering is like just engineering classes. You can combine it with biology. We've had students do all kinds of combinations with sociology, philosophy. I've had students who were doing psychology who went on to be art therapists. I've had students who were in our environmental studies program take a course I teach on environmentalism and contemporary art, and they begin to see the connections of how art plays such an important role in so many aspects of commenting on what's going on in society, as well as sort of influencing it. And so all your programs you'll have, it's important when you look at schools to see what courses they offer, and not just the title of the course, but also to look a little closer and think about what you study in that course. Let's see, this is a course teaching the spring on postmodern art, and it has a whole description of the course. Some courses, when you get to college, you'll see there's certain requirements, like does it count for your humanities requirement or your linguistic or cultural competency. And you can see by the numbers, right, how you move from your sort of foundation, right, the courses you'll take earlier. But also I teach a course like the business of visual art. And this is a course in which we get students across, economic students maybe in those courses. When I teach courses on Latin American art, there's students in Latin American studies. So important thing to think about when you're looking at schools and programs is not only the courses, but think about what other students are in those courses. What I love about a liberal arts college is you have students from all these different majors who are combining their study of, say, biology or English or history, that someone's interested in European history, taking a European art course, and really expanding and making their learning very interdisciplinary. The other thing, of course, to think about are things like facilities, right? This is really important when you're making art, is where you're gonna make the art, right? What are the facilities like? Here we are, Chris Duncan is in our beginning sculpture studio, where we're working with plastic and wood. Sandy, she's in our printmaking professor in the printmaking studio. Here are students working in the painting studio where they get to build their own frames. It's part of being an artist and studying the major is how do you develop a professional practice, right? That it's not just about making the work, but once you get out, how do you manage your supplies? How do you, and then also manage finding a dealer, finding a gallery and exhibitions. And so these are all the other things you learn in your studio courses. You have your painting studios. Union College, some programs have a A wet studio, it's not often. We're sort of very fortunate. We still have black and white or chemical photography where you're developing your film in these sort of baths of chemicals, largely black and white. But we also have digital photography as well, which is a big part of our program. And so here you can see a student, this would be like your introduction to drawing, right? Where you're learning the basics about layout, design, composition, black and white contrast, right? These are really important foundations. So before you go straight to making a website, it's really important you just understand how do you design an image on a space? How do you arrange the composition? How do you make it visually engaging? And then you move on to your digital courses, right? And so here in Union, it's wonderful as we have, and it's really important when you're looking at programs, what kind of machines they have, how often are they updated. Almost every year or two, we're getting new software, we're updating our machines every couple of years. There is a cost to that, but it's really important that students are working on the most current technological platforms. And so really preparing for them when they go on, that they have that sort of experience working with different technologies. And that's a really sort of wonderful program we have. It's a very popular program. But it's also about, you know, how do you sort of build physical objects? And for me, it's not just the work of art, but it's also the ability to go from how do you see something, how do I look at an object as if I can see it behind it, like in 3 dimensions, but looking at the front of it. And I did sculpture for my concentration, and I really understand how objects work in space. This has helped me in just, you know, interior design projects I've done. You know, it applies to so many different things. We also get students who are engineering students who are particularly interested in design and want to build and want to think about how do you make something look aesthetically pleasing or interesting, not just functional. And so what's great about a liberal arts college is because you have that freedom to take courses outside your major. Right. And that, you know, some people prefer to just focus on one track. I just want to go into politics. I'm just doing political science. Or some may say, I want to do politics, but let's take a course on Latin American art. Of course, I teach it. Think about the close connection of art and politics in Latin America. And in doing so, you learn about Latin American history and politics and society and all those other wonderful things. And this gets back to us. And then of course you have your faculty, you know, when you're studying, you want to think about what are their concentrations, what are they teaching? And so we have our, you know, you can go here and you can click on the individual artist or the art historians. You can also look at sort of where they may have studied, which is important to think about. Lainey Nemeth, she's one of our younger professors, newer to our program. And she is our, excuse me, our painting professor. And you can see here her expertise, some of the media she works with, also their work that they're doing, right? So that's also important, where she went to school. These are also important aspects to look at. And how are we doing on time? Just want to make sure I want to make sure we leave some time for questions.
So we have about 15 more minutes for the presentation before we move on to the Q&A.
You said 15 minutes?
Yes, 15 more minutes.
Yeah. All right, so let me just go back to this. So, oops, there we go. So I started talking about, you know, the careers that you can go into. And what's important to think about is how, you know, like I've done admissions tours and parents say, what can I do with a visual arts major? And I would say, what can you not do? And all of these majors, you can see how our courses that you take in the major lead up to it. So what I was saying before about taking, you know, our introduction to drawing and design, right? If you want to do something like a set designer, you really have to know the contrast of light and dark and the way shadows cast certain effects. Same thing with film production. If you want to be a fashion designer, understanding how clothes drape over a body, you really have to have taken like one of our life drawing courses, but also taking courses in design, understanding color and color contrast. And then of course you have all of your sort of careers that are more business or museum related that you do with art history, and you can combine these different things. I think what's important is students say they want to go into economics. I had a student, she was an economics major, found her way into art history. It often happens. People start taking courses in the arts, discover they really love it. They have a passion for it. She changed her major to, she actually did a double major when she had switched because she knew early on she wanted to do economics. She went on to start her own online auction house. And she was able to sort of combine the business understanding with you really have, like I said before, if you're selling art for large amounts of money, you really need to know what you're talking about, right? And that's where your art history courses are so critical, and that you are able to develop off of that. So again, these careers are ones that have a range of focus areas even within them, right? If you're doing film production, things like animation, right? So your digital courses are critical for going on to be an animator. We have students who've gone on or currently pursuing who want to be video game designers. That's a very popular area students are pursuing. And it's sometimes helped to have, by the junior or senior year, you begin to kind of understand what kind of career you want to go into. And then you can really craft your courses or your final projects, and they become sort of a launch pad. For example, my art historian student, Sofia Gabara, she did a summer research. There's also opportunities at Union where you can do summer research with a professor, and she did hers on art and technology. She ended up focusing her thesis on virtual reality, was really interested in that. And she found a lot of virtual reality is used to create greater empathy, to understand different people, different cultures. She found a lot that had to do with issues of social justice or issues of sort of, violence, and to better understand what it's like to be someone who has had a violent experience, to better empathize with that. And she went on to do that. And then she, for her business of art class with me, she then was able to, she was particularly interested in museums and designing museum spaces and thinking about how does the virtual play into design when it comes to exhibitions, which is another sort of growing area in museum curating. She went on to do an internship at the Williams Museum. They were in a process of redesigning their building and thinking about technologies. And she had this perfect sort of experience and focus area to do that. She's now going to Columbia. She's starting in Columbia. So she's been out for a year, and now she's going to Columbia to do art history. So part of it also is after you graduate, you try, your first career, the first sort of job you have, likely will not be your only job. I mean, more and more these days, people are going to have multiple jobs before they graduate. The other great thing about visual arts is because you have that flexibility, right, that you can pivot from different types of positions, right? And also when a liberal arts college, how do you combine those with, say, an understanding of economics? If you take a microeconomics or macroeconomics course, how do you relate it to how art plays a role in people's psychological experiences, like art therapy? What's really important about our programs, and you want to think about this, is also where they're located and the kind of guests they can bring. So because we're just, for us, it's what we call the co-curricular. You're learning in your courses, you're doing your projects, but it's really important to have guests come in. So I teach a business of art course, and I have Heather Hutchinson, who runs an art therapy program. She's a clinical art therapist. She came in, she did some projects with the students. The students who've graduated from my courses, I've been there long enough, coming back, the ones I mentioned earlier, Ellie, who runs a gallery. But we also have like the environmental policy student who took my course on environmentals and contemporary art. And she said, and it really sort of made me feel like I really accomplished what I was set out to do, is she said, I never thought that art could be such a game changer around environmental issues. And so it's also about, even taking courses in the visual arts, even if you're not going to be a major, I highly recommend it. People say, I can't draw. And I said, well, that's why you should take a drawing class. No one's born being able to, be a Picasso, right? These things take time and practice, but you will finish that course having a better understanding of design and visual elements. And it can go into applied to your other career in a different area. But it can also be, how do you experience everyday life? How do you see the world around you? How do you appreciate aesthetics? So these are some of the things, think about when you're going into a major, the type of courses they have. Do you have opportunities to exhibit your work? Do you have an opportunity to do a catalog? We want students to have, excuse me, as much experiences as possible in the professional world. And so your senior year is about preparing yourself for that, obviously preparing your CV, but in the arts, so much about it is your portfolio in terms of studio arts. In art history, it's sort of, what are the range of art history courses you've taken? writing, which is so critical in so many majors, right? And the other thing with art history, and I'll never forget this, I was on a subway in Manhattan about 10 years ago, and I heard the gentleman sitting next to me who worked for Sony Records, a record company. And he said, oh, we just hired this person. They're great. They were a double major in art history. They can do research, and English they could write. And I was like, yes. So, you know, being able to just do research and find and dig and get information, that's a skill set that is so important for any career you go into. Our students in art history become sort of specialists in that. They really learn how to find information, not just, of course, in books, but also connecting different things and looking at, you know, how do you use Google in a really effective way? And then how do you write and translate the visual into a text, right? How do you translate between mediums in your writing? And so those are the type of skill sets that you get, you know, even beyond these specific careers. But what you can actually, the type of skills you learn being a visual arts major in studio or art history, or combining it, that has applications to so many other potential careers or professions you might go into. So I think, are we close? I want to make sure I save time for questions.
Yes, I think we can start taking some questions now.
Wonderful. I'm just going to put on a prettier screen here. Okay, go ahead, anyone. I'm more than happy to answer some questions.
So we have started receiving questions using through the Q&A features down, and I can just start reading it out to you, and you can answer them, right?
Yes, that's probably the best way to do it.
Okay, so a student says that I really love painting and have painted various canvases. I wish to choose fine arts in major because I want to go into fashion industry as a retail manager. Seeing my situation, is it still necessary to learn about history of arts? Also, I don't like studying history. I'm not good at it.
Studying what?
I'm not good at it.
At history?
At history.
I think the big question is, what kind of history are you interested in? I mean, sometimes you may not like history because you don't like the period you're studying. You know, so taking ancient art, you know, I personally, I could teach that. I taught as an intro. It's not my interest, but when I started studying Latin American art, I just blossomed. I just found these areas that were, it's like anything. If you get curious about it, you will dig and do the history. You know, you'll find out more. I mean, really, you know, history is just learning about something that happened before today. So in my art history course, we call it art history, but I'm actually writing about artists who are still living and making work. And so what's particularly if you want to go fashion, like we actually, you know, taking a course in which you're doing sort of design, you can sort of do senior projects. We've had some students do, in fact, we just had a student, I wish I had the image to show you, who just did a project in which she did a whole line of surf clothing, jewelry. She designed a whole space, this shop, what it was going to look like. I've had students who graduated who've gone on. One of my students is an interior designer, and she was a dual concentration studio art history. And so painting is what you love. You paint, but what you get from that painting, understanding color and composition, and then taking a drawing class, you get to see those connections. So it may not seem like it connects, but it absolutely connects. And the thing about the visual arts, it really is driven by a passion and an interest. And that's what I love, right? And some people get worried, like, how does, you know, I'm really passionate about this, but how do I have a career? I say, you're already set because you have a passion. And when you have a passion, you are driven to work hard. And when you're driven to work hard, you will be successful. So don't ever think like, how do I connect this to this? This seems like, is it just making a painting? I'm going to sell paintings. I said, no, you can be a professional painter, but that painting course is so important for all the others going on to be a web designer. So, so never, you know, and again, so hopefully I sort of answered your questions and sort of, you know, relax you from worrying about history, you know.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Another student wants to know what kind of courses should he or she take if they want to pursue advertising and marketing?
Good question. Again, those foundation courses in terms of just understanding things like composition then lead into our digital courses and a digital sort of art design courses where you're sort of doing that type of work. We also have a course that is like an industrial design where they actually do packaging. They've done it, I think, like on different beverages where they had to come up with a logo and they had to come up with all those different elements. In my course on environmentals and contemporary art, students work in teams. And what's great, it's a very interdisciplinary course, and students are put into positions. They apply project manager, PR communications, creative director, and they do an installation on campus to bring awareness to environmental issue. But the process of that I really value is the sort of design thinking, the entrepreneurial aspect of it. How do you market it? So you're learning those skills. How do I get someone to stop on campus and talk to me about water pollution, right? How do I make something visually stunning that's going to get them to do that? So that skill, the ability to capture people's attention, marketing is all about that. You take art history, you're also understanding what art were people drawn to, right? Taking courses like modern art and understanding things like posters and graphic design. I mentioned one of my students, he was a graphic designer. He did some work on campus for the admissions office and combined that with his studio courses in art history, and then went on to be this designer. In my business of art course, students actually propose businesses. They do a market analysis. They go through all kinds of research. They interview people. And for he proposed, this is Chris Sionato, he had a mock website of he was going to do, or people can choose artwork to put in their offices. It was so professionally looking. He went to apply for a job and they're like, oh, let me see that business and that website. He said, well, actually it's just a mock-up. It's not a real thing. So my particular interest is I really want students to gain those transferable skills and gain those skills and that professional understanding and awareness that really sets you up and sets you apart from the competition. You know, so they may go marketing and just look at from the business side, but they're not really understanding the psychology. So taking a psychology course, you know, combining that, you know, with a studio course, those are where those things begin to connect. So the marketing is sort of up here, but there's all these sort of things below that percolate to that. And even within marketing, what are you marketing? Are you marketing innovations in technology? Are you working for Tesla, right? Who is the audience? Who are you marketing that to? Versus say, who are you marketing? Marketing social media, TikTok, right? So there's a range of areas you can go into, as well as a range of ways to sort of get there.
Absolutely. And I think Union does a brilliant job of making these connections between different fields. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think I keep telling people, you're not your major. The major is just sort of the thing that interests you, and you have to take more than one course, right, to get better at that. But the real world doesn't exist in majors, right? In fact, some of the Google are saying they don't even care what your major is. Now, I wouldn't say don't care what your major, but what they're saying is, do you have the skills to write, to research, to think creatively, to problem solve? I mean, all the things you'll see in like a college's mission statement, those are those transferable skills that go on with you. And the more you can see connections, both the courses you take, but for me, it's also who's in those courses. So the project manager who's an art history major is now working with the PR communications who's in sociology. How do you talk amongst different areas? It's not just the knowledge that you have for what you're doing, but can I communicate to someone? Can I communicate to an engineer who's creating an app, but now he has to find capital. So he has to know a little bit of business. So has he taken an intro to economics course, right? Does he understand cultural differences? That they're having a business meeting and they're putting this big breakfast together, but someone says, hey, it's Ramadan. You know, he's Muslim, maybe we should have him come later. Those decisions and those choices are huge and make such an impact. So taking a religious studies course actually connects to marketing. You wouldn't think it, but of course taking religious studies connects to life, right? Understanding people in different cultures. So I'm a big advocate for interdisciplinary studies. I actually was a director of American Studies. So if anyone's interested in that as well, I'm happy to answer questions about that.
Sorry, superb. So the next question here is, what are your tips for someone who wants to apply for a fine arts major at colleges? How should they start building up their resume or their portfolio now?
Very good question. Well, some schools require portfolios and some don't. Union does not require a portfolio. You have the option, and all of our faculty will review it. They'll sort of say, you know, the strength of that portfolio. That only helps. It can never hurt. So they will not let you in based on a portfolio that's not, say, strong enough. But if you're borderline and your GPA and you're really talented, that'll help you into the program. Some schools, so I applied to art schools where I had to go portfolio day, I had to build my portfolio. It's really important to show you can work in different media, that you can do drawing, you can do painting, you can do photography, right? A range of media. You also want to make sure you're not just copying flat two-dimensional images. And because you have to literally draw your hand, just draw your hand every day. The hand is the most challenging thing to draw. But if you can show someone that you can draw a hand really well, boom. So it's the quality, not just the quantity. And you want to choose the best pieces. You also, if it's a particular area you like, you may choose a couple. Some schools, I have a prospective student who's interested in Union. Her high school she had a website, she had a show. So getting your work exposed, it could be in your local library, church, synagogue, having those opportunities to show that you're also a hustler and you know how to get your art shown. These are all important parts of sort of building up your resume or your portfolio for applying to colleges.
Perfect, I think. Yeah. Okay. So students want, if you could elaborate a little more on what interior design is.
Absolutely. So, for example, the student who did the show, she knew from the get-go she wanted to do interior design. So she knew where she was ending up, but she took courses that she was excited about and passionate about. In her senior show, she had taken I think she took my environmental course, and they learned a lot about repurposing materials. And so she made these, that's what it was. She actually proposed a business in interior design. She met a local designer. They gave her some extra materials. She built this chandelier. She made curtains with stamps on the curtains. She actually, her final exhibit was a little sort of alcove or area we had in the gallery where she made it look like a living room. So interior design is basically designing interiors. Interiors can be your home, it can be business, so it could be residential, like a person's home. It could be industrial, professional spaces, corporate offices, right? If you've been to Google, I've been to the Google headquarters, one of them in LA, and just when you walk in the space, how is the space designed in terms of the stairs? What are the visual layouts? So that idea of knowing set design is important for interior design because you're dealing with spaces and how people feel in those spaces. I am proud to say I just painted my dining room. That's what I've been doing during quarantine. I spent forever picking out the right wallpaper, right? But it was exciting for me because I have that background experience. Now my boyfriend thinks I'm obsessed because I was Pinteresting like crazy. I'm like, I have to get this exact one. And then you see it. So it's also your own spaces. It's not just someone else's spaces. I actually thought early on I wanted to go interior design, but I didn't know how to get there, right? I also how do I get there? If you're doing anything that involves your vision, it's visual arts. And once you get into those programs, you have the professionals, you have the professors who can help you craft your destination. And so my student, she went to New England College of Design. She interned, she's doing wonderful work working with an interior designer. She had a whole spread in Architectural Digest. So, and if you look at those magazines, right, if you, of course, HGTV, if anyone watches that, right, don't just see what they do. What did they do? How did they get there? Where, talk to your interior designer. How did you get to where you are? What do you recommend I take? You'd be surprised at the sort of range of sort of working in your high school play and doing set design. That's a great, talk about portfolio, that's a great way when you talk about your statement to say, I want to be an interior designer. I've done set design, I had to cut and build, and that's where sculpture, right? Where when you get to a certain level, you just design it and someone else builds it. But you have to experience building before you can tell someone else how to build, right? That's where that sculpture, that welding course gets into interior design. Because now I'm like, I want this beam. It's like, well, that's not going to work because you have to, but they're like, have you taken sculpture? No, I never took sculpture. I don't understand how physics plays a role in gravity, right? So hopefully that helps you answer. I'm a big fan of interior design. I had a dream of being an interior designer, and I do my own little interior design in my home.
That's really shows how passionate you are about arts, design, environment, sustainability. In fact, The very next session that we are doing is on environment and sustainability. Maybe that's something you might be interested in.
Awesome.
So the next question is, a student wants to know if I love painting canvases and do anything that's related to arts. So I can take up arts as my major, but I'm confused as to what to take up as my minor.
So it's way too early to worry about your minor. You know, a major is a good place to start in terms of, do they offer that major? That's the most important thing. I know I want to do art. Okay, what schools have art programs? What are those art programs like? You know, I think the important thing is a lot of students, you only get experience with what you've been exposed to. Like me, when I went through high school, you know, we did painting, we did drawing. I didn't quite understand. I actually have a minor in crafts. Because what I found out, this is what happened to me, because I'm always making these connections. I was taking pre-Columbian art, you know, ancient art from like, you know, 100, 500 AD. And I was like, well, if I'm going to study pottery, I have to learn how to make a pot. So I took ceramics. I fell in love with ceramics. I had to make, then I started doing ceramic sculpture. And I was making these big pieces. And then my professor's like, you just put in the kiln and you got to check you have to babysit every, you know, hour. I'd come back from my other classes, and then it blew up in the kiln. And I had to, you know, improvise and pivot. I said, you know what if I did sections and build it? And then I said, why don't I work with wood? So I ended up in the sculpture department, and sculpture was my concentration. But because I was a minor, I took jewelry design, I took glass blowing. So I also know, so taking glass blowing helps me in choosing my chandelier, right? So, you know, I think the thing is you start, you know, you don't have to have everything figured out. You shouldn't. You should let yourself unfold and you weave. You don't know what you don't know. I mean, for me, I never heard of anthropology till I got to Union College. I didn't even know what this field was. And now it's not just about, you know, studying people in Fiji, but it's someone who did a colleague of mine who's an anthropologist wrote a book on plastic surgery in Brazil. I never thought that was connected to anthropology. So these connections happen while you're in school, and they continue the rest of your life. The more diverse your foundations are when you're in college, the more entry points you have to careers, but it's also about just enjoying life. You've taken art history and now you go to Paris. I was in Paris last year. I went to the Musée d'Orsay, and literally I was looking at these paintings by Monet that I was teaching 2 months later when I got back to campus. You know, so my experiencing travel is so enriched because of what I know. And I've learned so much about all these different things, about different cultures, different histories. So painting is where most students start, and that's okay. And that's a good starting point. I mean, I have this image here, so you can see, right? This is what students sort of know you're familiar with, as for most students, right? I mean, the most inexpensive thing you can do is get a piece of paper and a pencil. So no matter your resources, in fact, I have some visions. I'm thinking about starting an art camp for underserved communities, refugees, because there's so much creative talent out there. You just need some access, but even making things from nature. So give yourself an opportunity to build some objects, right? Learn about that. So get to that previous question. You're not just submitting paintings, but you made an object out of cardboard. It doesn't really matter. You can make a beautiful object out of cardboard and a glue gun, right? Or string. And let yourself play. Art is very much about play and being free to try new things. And that's why artists, personally, I think, are the most open-minded people.
True. That's really a great advice, and I'm sure. I think yes, just as you said, that you don't have to decide everything right now, and it's great that you have decided your major, but let things unfold gradually as you move into the school. Wonderful. We have about just enough time to take 2 more questions, so I'll read out the next one for you. Here is it. What is graphic design? What do graphic designers do?
Excellent question. Well, graphic design is basically largely 2 dimensions. Graphic means basically I think it's Latin for sort of drawing, right? Like photographic is sort of drawing with light, photo, right? So you can actually learn by looking at the roots of these words, which is sort of interesting. I learned that later. And so graphic design is largely 2 dimensions. Graphic designer, if you can basically render something, But usually graphic design is more into sort of the industrial arts. It can go on to being a web designer, right? So graphic design is how do you draw and design? It can be designing a logo, right? How do you use design elements? So design is a really important word. And design is an incredible skill set. And it's design is where everything's at right now. If you can not just make design, but think like a designer. So design thinking, you might want to look that up. Design thinking is something I teach and I've studied. It's about, you start with sort of what we call empathy. What are people going to be sort of drawn to? You make an idea, you test it out, and then you may refine it. So graphic design applies to so many areas. It can be magazines. You're being a designer for a fashion magazine. It can be designing the layout of TikTok. I have these stepdaughters, so they're all the so it's basically 2 dimensions, flat, but now more and more that's digital, right? So you're not building with your hands. However, taking that sculpture course to understand how do I make something look 3D that's flat and 2D. Sculpture is going to help that. That's why we have those foundation courses. But it opens you up for all kinds of design fields. So fashion designer, think about that, set designer, right? People who design something, and usually it's because someone else is going to look at it or experience it.
Okay, wonderful. Can I still take a minor in arts if I don't have a portfolio?
Absolutely. Usually minors don't ever require a portfolio. A lot of our students, we had a student who was a math major. He started taking some painting courses, realized that was his passion. His parents were like, no, you got to do math. But he loved art. That's what got him up in the morning. That's what he would be in the studio all night. He is an amazing painter. He's gone on to do fine art and graduate degree. That's the other important part is think about graduate programs. It doesn't have to end after 4 years. But a minor, most schools that they have a minor means you can combine it with any major. Usually most schools don't have any, there's no prerequisite before you apply. And it's something where you may take a few courses. Most minors like union are 6 courses is how you complete a minor.
Wonderful. There are more questions, but unfortunately we can't take them all.
I do want to say I am more than, right, I'll give you my email.
Okay,
wait, is this on YouTube? Maybe you should send him my email.
Sure.
Do send anyone who has questions. I'm more than happy to, though it's probably out there, and it Coxl, it's COXL at union.edu.
Okay.
And you can go to Union
I'll
College.
just paste that in the chat box so that, yeah. So,
and if you ever come to visit Union College, call me. I'm happy to show you around our amazing building, 3 stories, skylights. It's gorgeous. It's a really, we have a great program. Just got to plug my program.
So in fact, Union College, the not memorial, is it? Yeah, it was there on the Next Seniors brochure last year. The main building on our brochure.
Yeah, it's a one of a kind. It's one of the few, like, was it 16-sided buildings? I forget how many sides. North America. It was built in 1870.
Wow, it's a really old building. So it was a pleasure to have you here today. Would you like to give any final word of advice to these bright young students who might be looking at Union College, and most of them are actually looking at some kind of arts design kind of programs?
Excellent. I think what the people who just ask questions, that's the most important thing. Ask questions. Have a list of maybe 10 questions and ask them at different colleges. Then you can compare and contrast the answers. I think one thing about art, it really has a lot to do with also, the facilities are important, but it's the professors. And talk to students who go to that school. I've had a student who said, can you give me some, sure, here's some names of students. I think I consider myself a passionate person. The people who inspired me in art were my passionate professors, so if you can get to those colleges, and Zoom. I just Zoomed with a student from Massachusetts. And we spent an hour talking about the program. So just get more information. So when you make your choices, you'll really feel like they're informed choices, and you won't go somewhere and like, oh, maybe I should have went there because, they had and some people go straight to art school. I almost went to Maryland College of Art and Design, but I wanted to be at a university. I didn't want to be just around artists. So that's another thing to think about as well. So this is a pleasure. Thank you so much. I'm happy to participate. Again, if you have any questions, email me, call my office. I'm not going to be there that much because I'll be virtual, but email is probably the best way to get me. I'm on LinkedIn too.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much for your time today. It was a great, superb session. I did not know there are so many things that an artist can do. There are so many jobs that an art major can take. And you said you actually had to cut down the list because of there was limited
Yeah, I
space.
couldn't fit them. There's so many. There's so many. So I just put ones that maybe, people will find interesting.
Great. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your time today.
Sure.
And hopefully looking forward to connecting with you once.
Wonderful. And good luck with everyone, your college searches.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.